Hello everybody, today I wanted to talk about, my name is Daniel Gomali by the way, I'm a Grandmaster from Northumberland, currently live in Northumberland, England. I wanted to talk about which English players can in theory become Grandmasters. Sort of like inspired by reading this Fishy Annan book at the moment. He talks about talking to Stuart Rubin, because Annan was the first Indian player to become a Grandmaster. He talks about how Rubin kind of reassured him that he may have failed a few times in a row, but then eventually he will succeed. So let's have a look at the players that are currently playing in the European Championships and playing for England. Obviously, you've got Viti Yugov, who's already a Grandmaster, previously representing Russia. He's one of the strongest players we have in this country. Then you've got Daniel Fernandez, who's one of the most promising young players. He is currently losing some points. He's not having a great tournament, but he has one of the people who've done very well lately and kind of fought against the rating deflation. You've then got Matthew Wadsworth, who's currently rated 24. I must admit, I thought he was higher than that. So his rating is gone to. He's currently run at 24.64. Now I believe, I could be wrong about this, that he either has 2 or 3 GM norms. Now Wadsworth, in my opinion, I would say has over 70% chance to become a GM, maybe higher than that, maybe 80%. I think the biggest challenge is going to be the rating, right? Obviously, I'm looking a bit smug doing this video, I'll be honest, but I just wanted to see if because I'm already a GM, right? So I'm kind of like going from a position of, oh, I'm already a GM, but I know how tough it was to become a GM. I thought there were periods where I thought I wasn't going to do it. It is important to become a Grandmaster because you look, no doubt these people look at me and they think, well, hang on a minute, why am I not got the same ranking as Gormali? I know how tough it was to become a GM. I felt the same about some of my colleagues at the time. I looked at them and I thought, well, they're not stronger than me. How come they're GMs and I'm not? Because I kept failing. I kept missing GM norms by half a point. Eventually I got the rating before I got the title. So I got the rating, but then I couldn't get the final norms. So you got Wadsworth. I think he's got a very good chance. He's probably the one in the best position. I would say that him and Harry Grieve. I'm not sure what Harry Grieve's rating is at the moment, but I think that Harry Grieve has got an excellent chance. So I would say that him and Harry have probably got the best chance of any English player to become a GM in the future. Well, obviously you have to leave out people like Bodhana and Supratir and Ethan Pang and so on because they're a little bit younger. That's a separate issue. You would expect if they carry on playing chess, they will definitely make GM. I don't think making GM is the achievement it was, but it's still a great achievement. Jonah Willow, possibly actually it's tougher than it was because of the rating deflation. Magnus Carlsen just mentioned he thinks it's at least 20 or 30 points. So even the elite players are now admitting that there is rating deflation because there are less 2700 players now than there ever were. So then you got Jonah Willow, who's 24.54. I think that Jonah's made some good progress lately. Actually, he got an IM norm, and he's doing fairly okay in this tournament. He did draw last couple of games was slightly disappointing. He lost to Max Warmadan, which is understandable. His last game was a bit shaky. I think that's the thing with Jonah. He's a little bit up and down. If he can be just a little bit more consistent, he'll easily get there. He'll probably get there anyway. But, yeah, the fact he's got one norm now, he's still fairly young. He's going to kick on, I think. Then you got Yang Fan Zhu. Now, Yang Fan's an interesting case because Yang Fan is stopped playing chess for several years. I'm not sure why, but he did have a few problems with maybe nervous tics at the board and so on. I don't know if he's corrected those. Probably put himself under pressure in that regard. Although apparently he didn't notice it himself, but I think other people did notice it. I remember a game that I lost to Yang Fan. I got very stroppy afterwards, which obviously I was a bit sorry about. But I felt that he put me off, but he didn't do it deliberately, of course. He's very good friends with a lot of the top Chinese players as well, which is an advantage. He's doing okay-ish at this tournament. He's 24, 18. He's still a fairly young guy. So even though he stopped playing chess for many years, it's funny how it draws you back in. It's like an addiction, chess. And it drags you back in. You're like, I get out. I mean, the only player I can think of who got out for a long period, well, Matthew Sadler's one, who basically quit, but then he started playing chess again to a certain degree. The only one I know of, well, Bobby Fischer, of course, was a famous example. Stopped for 20 years, but even he came back, right? One player I would say who has never come back playing professionally as what's his name? I'm trying to remember his name now. James Howe. So before you had a Chris Howe, and well, there was Chris Howe was before James Howe, but before you had a David Howe, there was a James Howe, and James Howe is not a player that many people would be familiar with. Obviously, leave comments down below if you've heard of him. Maybe you are James Howe yourself. Stop playing. Now, in my opinion, a lot of GMs, so he got the GM title and decided, right, I'm going to stop playing, I want to get a job, don't want to be a chess bum anymore. I think very wise decision to make. However, I think a lot of the reason a lot of the GMs who get the title stop playing, so I predict a lot of these players, if they do get the title, they might actually stop playing a lot. Daniel is actually a very active GM. He's carried on playing a lot, but I think he's had cases in the past where he's thought about quitting. But a lot of GMs, I think, stop playing because they get more of a comfortable living from doing coaching, even if they stay within chess itself. Doing the coaching, making videos, whatever. And the thing about playing tournaments is it's stressful. You know, it's stressful. There's anxiety when you play because you're worried about losing. You can take all that away if you stop playing as much. So there have been a lot of players who have quit. Another player I would say, Jeroen PK from the Netherlands, he stopped playing more or less. Joel Lautier is another one. Jonathan Hawkins, all starting with J, weirdly enough. James Howe. So if your name starts with J, Jonathan Parker's another one who more or less stopped playing. Robert James Fisher. So if your name starts with J, then you're more or less likely to quit. So Jonah Willow must be long odds on to stop playing once he gets GM title, in my opinion, based on that theory, but possibly not. Yeah, Jonah's a very talented player. Yang Fan Borna is somebody who's looking for the IM. I'm pretty certain he's got IM norms. He's quite a good player as well, very solid. Kobe, I don't know so much. He stopped playing for quite a long period. Seems to be in good form. Won the Scarborough Congress recently. So that's another one. Yeah, I mean, there's people like there's Irish players as well. So if we look at Fernandez, he's played Taran, who's also a good player and has a chance to get the GM title in the future. But the more you play, the older you get, obviously the tougher it becomes because the scar tissue is accumulated. I looked at the results of the recent FIDE Congress who got awarded the GM title. Amit Gartzi may well have been one of them. I'm not sure if he got awarded it with the last one. No, I think it was Shreyas. Shreyas was the English one, but Amit will get awarded fairly soon if he hasn't been already. Yeah, the one at the Olympiad, there were very few players over, say, the age of 30 who got the GM title. I know there was a famous case recently where a player in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, I think it's Castellanos or something, Renier Castellanos, got the GM title. Obviously, if you're older, it's still possible. It's just much tougher. If I had to get the GM title now from scratch, I don't think I would do it unless I could play a lot of tournaments. If I could play all the time, constantly, on the road all the time, I might have a chance. Play tournaments like this, like every month, I might have a chance because you play yourself into form. You played enough to potentially get norms. I haven't got a norm like the equivalent of a GM norm since about 2014, 2013, which would have been, it was the same year. I remember it's been the same year that Andy Murray won the Wimbledon title. We were playing in the Scottish Championships in Helensburgh, which is quite near long. So it's sort of like on the River Clyde, going away from Glasgow, sort of like you get a train from Glasgow and then you get to Helensburgh, a beautiful little town. It's on the River Clyde. You see the ships. Lovely place. It's sort of on the river, so you walk down. I remember one day I walked down. It's about a 5 mile walk to get to Loch Long, which is where they have the submarine base for Farlane, which is a nuclear UK Trident sort of like nuclear deterrent in case Russia decide to launch their missiles. We have a potential counterattack. But that was probably the last time I got a GM norm. So I was inspired by this thought of nuclear apocalypse and or the equivalent of a GM norm. I played enough GMs. Obviously, I was already a GM by that point. I had been for several years, but I haven't actually got that many GM norms during my career. I probably got about 6 GM norms, I would say. I think I got one. First one I got was about 2000. I think it was about 2001 in the Ron Banwell Memorial, and I would have been about 2001, A Space Odyssey. I would have been about 25 at the time. And I probably should have got ones earlier, around about 1997, 1998. I started missing them 1999. And then 2002, I got another one. And then I had to wait until about 2005. I think I got another one in the Challengers. The second one I got was in the Challengers, and it was against quite a well-known Latvian GM, Miezis. I beat him in the last round to get a GM norm, get my second GM norm. The third and final GM norm got a 26.93 performance in Gibraltar in 2005, and that was when I got my title. I beat Dreyev for 2700 at the time to get my title. That's when I should have kicked on and started playing a lot more. I was good enough then, and I didn't realise that this isn't going to last forever. You need to be kicking on, so these guys need to be kicking on and playing as much as possible. And I was playing good players like Dreyev, who would be at the top of this, European Championships. And I was competitive with them. I drew with Aronian in that tournament. I drew with Nakamura. Lost to Sutovsky in probably one of the best games ever played. I beat Rogers, drew with Sasha Kieran. These are the sort of players who would obviously be bang up there in the European Championships. Sutovsky's already won a European Championships. Obviously, Aronian's been number 2 in the world. Nakamura doesn't need much explanation. So yeah, it's all there for you as long as you put the work in my opinion. As for the older players, there's a few older players. There's a few IMs who could have become GMs, didn't quite make the grade. I'd say Lawrence Trent would be in that category. He could still potentially do it if he focused full time on the chess. But he always says he will, and he never does. He got to 2470. Never quite got to GM. So he never quite got to GM. I think he got 2 norms, and he was live at 2470 during a maybe it was a 4 NCL or something like that. Lost to Sokolov or something. It was maybe during a Gibraltar. I can't remember, Gibraltar tournament. And he failed. He lost that game, and then ever since then he's gone down a little bit. So he's below 2400 now. A lot of players. This is the problem that you find as a younger player trying to become a GM. If you're, let's say you're 24-20, you're often playing against people even younger than you are. Quite recently I've been paired against players who are 10, 11, 12. We see the other day a 3-year-old became like FIDE rated. You don't want to play against those people when you're trying to become a GM. When I got the GM title, most of the people I beat were older than me. I very rarely played like people who were younger. I mean, I would say I was like late 20s, like mid 20s, late 20s. You didn't have the same amount of juniors that you have now. The pandemic changed a lot, I think, in that respect. Don't get me wrong, it was still tricky. There were still tough pairings, but it's easier to play against older players. You kind of know where you are. You know what to expect. But yeah, for the older players, so we're talking about people like Lawrence Trent. We're talking about people like Peter Roberson and Richard Pert. I'd say Roberson is a good player, but I think he's going to struggle to become GM because I'm not sure how many norms he has. I'm not actually Yang Fang. I'm not sure he's got any norms. He may have 1 norm, I think, from a 4 NCL or something. But Roberson, he's got a full-time job. So Yang Fang's probably got a better chance than someone like Roberson, even though his rate might be currently lower, because I'm not sure if he's working full-time. If he's not working full-time, he's probably got a better chance than someone like Robertson. Richard Pert recently went below 2400. He's back over 2400. But I think, to be honest, he's got a very low chance, a little bit like Robertson, unless he starts playing full time, because he's not going to be able to get enough momentum going to gain enough points. Never mind the GM norms themselves. He's not going to be able to gain enough momentum to gain enough points to get the title. To go from, say, 24, you know, with a Yang fan currently is 24-18, the way Yang fan can become a GM is to play a lot and gain rating and gain momentum. But if you're just stopping starting, even if you get a GM norm somewhere, you're not going to gain enough momentum. So the next tournament you might play is in, say, 3 months' time. You lose that, you have a bad tournament there, you've lost all that momentum, you're pretty much back to square one on rating. It's just very difficult. And I think you see that as well with Levi Rosman. Levi Rosman is, he probably doesn't, even though he plays quite a lot, he possibly still doesn't play enough tournaments because he's doing all the streaming. Will he even keep this momentum going? So that's my opinion on who will become GM in the future out of the current, like, younger crop of. Some name I mentioned. Sorry, a couple of names I should have mentioned. Marcus Harvey, who I think has got a good chance of becoming a GM. He's actually someone who's full time as well, but because he's younger and his rating is much higher, I think he's got a much better chance than the older players. Because the only problem is he's not got any norms and he plays so sparingly that it's going to be difficult for him to become a GM. But I think he's improving slowly, and just his general form of late has been good enough to say, well, he's got a good chance. I'm not sure what I would put his percentage chance. I put like Wadsworth and Willow potentially above 70%, along with Harry Grieve. I'd put them above 70%. Maybe Marcus slightly. I think if Marcus was full time, it might even be a higher percentage than that. But because he's not full time, just player, I would say his chances of getting the GM title are probably around 50%, because, you know, how many tournaments did he play over last year where he could get a GM, or maybe one? So he needs to play slightly more. But obviously people change their life. The lifestyle can change. You might stop working as hard. The same thing happened with Ami. That's why Ami got the title, I think, because he cut back on the work for a period and he started playing a bit more, and then started studying a bit more on the chess. Made the breakthrough. Of course, once you get the title, that's really the key thing. Is when you get the title, what do you do then? Because you then want to kick on and you want to maybe challenge people like, people in the UK who are at the top of the UK rankings, people like in the British Championships, people like, David Howell. Obviously, it's going to be very tough to challenge people like that, but you want to get a little bit closer to them. You might not be able to challenge them, but if you get to 25-50, they know you're a kind of a force. Somebody who's not going to be easy to push around, basically, but still, they seem to do it at every British Championships, right? So it's tough. But another player I would also mention is Brandon Clark. Brandon Clark, again, like if he was full time, I would say his chances of getting GM are probably over 80%. But because he's more or less stopped playing, I would say his chances now are fairly low of becoming a GM. Like, obviously, if you don't play at all, you're not going to become a GM, right? It's just certain. So it's just a question, is Brandon Clark going to play a bit more to become a GM? But anyway, those are my thoughts on the, what do we think about the overall European individual. These are the pairings today. There's only 2 players on 4.5 out of 5. So that would be +4. Probably going to be a lot of draws again. This is what happens in this tournament. I would imagine the rest stays after this. Now, this is a winnable pairing for Viti Yugov. If he wins this game, he's probably back in the mix. However, if he draws, this guy's got a chance. Gurel, I would say. It could well be an upset. I mean, the favourites are looking not completely convincing. We've got not Motliev, but what's his name? Who's the top seed in this tournament? Top seed is Fedoseev. Where's Fedoseev? Oh, there he is at the top. Yeah, he got winnable pairing against Friedman, who's a many-time winner of the German Championships. Down in for another guy who's suffered from rating deflation because he was one time well over 2600. Now he's only 2580. Sargissyan's got a chance. Quite a sort of solid player, I would say. Very much a very technical player. He's never quite won the European Championship. He's been very close on several occasions. He's been as high as 2700 in the past, I think. Motliev is a former winner of the tournament. Edgar Gomez, that's an interesting. He's 2600 and he's only like 13, right, or something. It's crazy. So it wouldn't surprise me if he won it. Will his nerve hold? And harder. And obviously this guy's young. He's quite promising. Garel is quite a good player. He's quite young, very young, and he works really hard. You know, there was talking to him at the Olympiad, and he said he spends sort of 4 to 5 hours a day preparing for the game. That's what you need to do to get at that level. So if people want to become GMs, if they got to treat it like a full-time job, you got to do 4 to 5 hours a day on chess, you know, and treat it like a full-time job, and you can get there. So yeah, that's my prediction. I think this is obviously a very open tournament, extremely open. Who are the English players playing today? See if we can predict their pairings, like predict their results. Well, we know that we should know their pairings, but we're going down a bit. So you got Fernandez. He's playing as interesting because we saw that the other day. The John Paul West, a really good game with Black. He's another player who's a little bit inconsistent, I would say. I'd say it's a good pairing for Fernandez because John Paul Wallace has got a similar style to Fernandez. He's quite aggressive, but I'd say that Fernandez, you know, often it's when you have two players similar style meet, it's a player who's better at it that tends to win. So I would go for Fernandez as a white win in that game, but not certain. He's not playing that great. Wadsworth has got Holker, not a player I'm particularly familiar with from Ukraine. I imagine that's quite a young player. Yeah, he's born, so he's only 19. But Wadsworth, how old is Wadsworth? So he's not that young actually. He looks older than that, doesn't he? Because he's sort of quite a big guy, but he's like 24. He's been around for a while. But yeah, he's still pretty young actually. I didn't realise. I thought he was like late 20s. Jonah is like a similar age to that. He's even younger, so he's only 22, Jonah, yeah. I mean, that's young, isn't it? I mean, Kobe... How old is Kobe? Kobe was born, yeah, same age. You got Borna, who's, yeah, same age as all these guys. And then we haven't seen, how old is Yang Fan? Oh, Yang Fang is, I don't know, why is Yang Fang down on this born 191? Is it because of this thing about making the noise or something? I don't quite understand that. That doesn't make any sense. Why is he on board 191 when they've got a reasonable sort of score? But he's actually quite old now, like, you know, compared to what he was. He's 30. But he's still young guy, could still make it, but he needs to... So anyway, those are my... Yeah, he needs to kick on. But these are my predictions for who will become a GM. I would say, the moment, Yang Fan's probably got about a 25% chance. If he wasn't full-time, he'd have a less than 10% chance. He's a bit older now. If he can play a lot of tournaments, I think he's got going to be more than 25% chance, maybe more than 50% chance. You know, so it's just a question of how much he plays, how much work he puts in. And I imagine he's a fairly hard worker. And yeah, good luck to all these guys. Hopefully they can all... I just feel like it's tough to become a GM. We've seen in the last few years. I mean, Amit became a GM, but he was GM level for many years. One of the most talented players we've had in this country. And he finally cracked it. But he was sort of high 2500s for quite a long period. Possibly did dip down a bit at some point. And then obviously Shreyas is very young, but obviously like a super uber talented player. But other than that, we haven't had many. You know, people assume, you know, there's a famous sort of Harvard study, I think it was, and they did this study where Harvard Business School, where they said people overrate potential. So when you see when you see like somebody who's already a GM and you see somebody who could become a GM, most people prefer they say, well, who's going to become the better player? Most people prefer the person who hasn't become a GM, because there's two possibilities. Either they become a GM or they don't become a GM. So the brain finds that possibility more exciting than the person who's already become a GM and potentially, you know, could improve, but you're thinking about these two possibilities, whereas with that, you've only got one possibility. So that is the theory why people tend to overrate potential, and you look at that and you say, well, that player's got over 80% chance. In reality, possibly that isn't true, because you know, we've had so few GMs over the last few years, but it would be good to see a few of those. So I would say my bankers are probably Harry Grieve, Wadsworth, Jonah Willow. Not sure about any of the others. I think they're the three most likely, mainly because they're playing a lot. Although I must admit, Harry Grieve has been playing a little bit less lately, so possibly he's got other things going on in his life. Anyway, that's my video. Sorry it took so long.